Welcome again to another episode of Just Saying, presented to you by the American Landscape. My name is Cliff Nichols, your host and curator of the American Landscape. And today we are joined with none other than the famous Brian Godawa, who has been a friend for some years, and he is the most amazing guy. He has written prolifically throughout his life. He has been a screenwriter, screenplay writer, and filmmaker. And in addition, he has written an unbelievable number of novels, his most recent of which is a book called Cruel Logic. Welcome, Brian.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, let me mention also that you were the screenplay writer of a successful and award-winning movie, To End All Wars.
Yeah.
And subsequently, you also wrote the screenplay to none other than My Son Hunter.
Yeah, we'll talk about that eventually, but
yeah, let's get to that later on down the line. But let's start with Cruel Logic. You say that it addresses wokeism on college campuses. I find that fascinating for this reason. You listen to people like Steve Bannon and President Trump and all of these people about cleaning out the deep state. And the last couple times I interviewed Catherine McKinney, and we talked about the emerging socialism in this country. And one of the great portals of that socialism / communism coming into the country is through our college campuses. So you wrote a most novel novel, this Cruel Logic, and give us the premise and give us the, where does it get into wokeism?
Yeah, so it's called Cruel Logic, the Philosopher Killer. And what it is it's the story of, there's kind of two big stories that are going on simultaneously, but the basic premise of it is, the high concept is, there's a serial killer in the university, and what he's doing is he's capturing university professors, and he's debating them and video recording the debates. And the topic of his debate is his moral right to kill them. So he'll say something like, okay, if, he'll get like a evolutionary biologist, or he'll get a postmodern theorist, or a feminist, or what have you, and he'll put them in the chair, so to speak, and literally tied in the chair, and they have to debate for their lives. He'll say, if what you say is true about the universe or the world, then give me one valid reason why I should not kill you, and I will let you go. And he's serious.
That's
he's
a fascinating premise.
Yeah, I mean, everyone, people who don't like the idea, they'll say, oh, well, he's just going to kill him anyway. But it's like, no. I mean, when you read the story, you realize the guy's a philosopher, and he's actually serious, because he's making a moral argument that is actually having to do with what he's doing as killing. And I'm not going to give away all the details, but he's actually making an argument to the cop who's chasing him down, and the psychologist who's also helping the cop to profile him and catch him. And what turns out that the psychologist is, I loosely based him on Jordan Peterson. So, if you love Jordan Peterson
or base anybody on Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, Douglas Murray, a lot of these guys that are, intellectuals who are defending Western civilization, that's sort of who that psychologist character is based on. But at the same time, I have a story of a young evangelical Christian goes to this secular college, this woke college for as a freshman. And he gets introduced into social justice, and because of his, his desire as a Christian to be compassionate, right? He gets pulled into it. And I wanted to chronicle the typical journey of how people are caught up into social justice, particularly on college campuses, and show how it draws them in and ends up forcing him to make some life and death decisions that prove to be very dramatic for the story, let us just say. And what I did was I based the novel, like everything that happens to this Christian freshman, right? Everything that happens to him from like, for instance, he has to take an IA test, which is the implicit, what's it called? The implicit bias test or something like that, where it actually, you give answers to questions and it'll tell you how racist you are. That stuff is really going on in universities. And so he does that in my story. There's a sex week at the university where they engage in, lectures and presentations of the most bizarre sexual perversions you can imagine on college campuses. That too is something that it goes on a lot of college campuses. Interestingly, it started at Yale University like over a decade or more ago, maybe 2 decades ago now. And it was, of course, when it started, it was shocking, but now it's regular on every campus, right? And so and then also as he gets into social justice, he interacts with some Antifa and some BLM activists, and he gets involved with those. And it shows you, all rooted on actual things that are occurring in today's world. So you read this and you'll actually get an education of what's going on in the university. Even though it's a fictional story, it is the true kind of things that are going on. But the main heart and soul of what I wanted to do is I wanted to tell a story that I love serial killer stories. I love, thrillers and such. But it
Murder
was
mysteries.
Yeah. Although in this case, you know who the murderer is because it's the detective trying to track the murderer down. So we see the murderer as he's debating these various professors and such. And I wanted to actually, the origin of the story began actually a long time ago as a screenplay originally. And I was never able to get it made in Hollywood, which doesn't mean it's bad. There's a lot of great
But not
stories.
surprising.
Yeah, there's a lot of great stories that don't get told. So it's not unusual.
May I ask, did you approach Diddy to get it made? Just wondering.
To get funding, huh? Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, proceed.
But, and so I tried to get it made as a movie, and I made actually a short called Cruel Logic. You can even find it on YouTube, which is with one of the scenes of the debates, right? So this isn't it's not a gory story. My goal wasn't to portray grotesque serial killing stuff. It was more about the tension of defending your beliefs. Could you defend your beliefs, and particularly your morality? Of course, in a godless universe, in a worldview that is atheistic or doesn't believe in God, there really ultimately, I would argue, is no basis for morality. And of course, the university has been arguing that for decades, right? The postmodernism, this is what Jordan Peterson has addressed a lot. Postmodernism has completely captured the university along with its pet Marxism. But postmodernism is rooted in the one of the primary beliefs is there is no God and everything is reducible to power. All claims of truth, all claims of morality, everything, all knowledge is just power relations. But what happens with that is if you believe that, then ultimately what you're going to have is people just doing anything to get power. And is that the kind of world you want? So I tried to depict what's the sort of logical consequence of that, at least on a thinking logical level or a philosophical level, and to try to embody that in essence in the serial killer himself. In a way, he's the ultimate Ubermensch. He's the person who's living out the logical conclusion of the philosophy in most universities. And that wokeness is a part of it in that, not only are the professors Marxist in their in all their theories, but they're postmodern. And so my character has several classes. Like I said, there's a biology class he goes to. Since he's a freshman, he's getting some basic classes. And you sort of get an introduction into the way these worldviews are presented in the college classroom. And another interesting thing I did was when the professors are teaching, a lot of the scenes, I actually draw quotes from real books written by, professors and scholars, whether it's evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins. I draw from Carl Sagan. I draw from a lot of these atheists through history, Friedrich Nietzsche. I bring up a lot of the ideas that have actually gone on through the Western world. And so in a sense, as this evangelical Christian is descending into the abyss of social justice, and ultimately the activism connected to it. At that same time, they're trying to capture this killer, and they're getting closer and closer. And the hero is kind of the hero. One of the heroes is the psychiatrist, and he's a man who's fighting for Western civilization. So he's a professor who is actually defending it, whereas many of the students and the professors at the university are trying to get rid of all classes related to Western civilization, which is also another thing that is going on. It's actually already been accomplished on most universities.
Is he also a man of faith?
Actually, he's a man of lost faith. He's a Jewish. The psychologist is actually a Jewish person who has lost his faith and has a bad relationship with his father. So there's a lot of interpersonal relationships that have to be dealt with on there. So that was sort of the big picture issues of what I'm trying to deal with. But my initial idea was rooted in a thriller based on a serial killer story that really, believe it or not, I actually got the original idea for the serial killer from a Christian apologist from 30 years ago, 40 years ago, named Walter Martin. And he was on this radio show that I was listening to called the Long John Nebel Show in the 60s. And he was describing his frustration that he was debating with an atheist about the existence of God. And he's trying to explain to him that you have no foundation for morality if you don't believe there's a God. There's just power, or just, the will to power, right? And the atheist kept saying, well, I believe in morality. I believe in morality. What are you talking about? And he goes, yeah, you believe in morality, but your atheism doesn't provide a foundation for it. And
and that's why they respond with, when you come to them with morality, that's your morality.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I have my morality, and
right.
It doesn't suit that. I will say, now with this description of this Christian student entering college and going through what you're describing, I can bear witness to a nephew of mine who was raised in the church, who was an abiding Christian going in to this university. And it was a top university on the West Coast. And when he came out, I did not recognize him. After 4 years, he came out an absolute atheist, an absolute woke individual on every level. Liberal didn't describe him. He was far right. And he went on to write, he was an English major, and after graduation, he went on to write a book that was using ink for sacrilege, quite a hefty novel that got on and was awarded the Oprah Book Club Award at one point, and became very successful, and he spread his atheism far and wide. I pray for him occasionally. I would hope that he would come back, because he blasphemed not only his church, but his former childhood pastor. Anyway, I digress.
No, that's a very common, in fact, that's a very common thing today. Look, Christians going to college and losing their faith has been going on since the beginning. The beginning, universities were actually created by Christians, Princeton, Yale, et cetera. But then over the decades, of course, over the century, they became, atheist institutions. But, forever, Christians have been going to college and losing their faith there. But there is this phenomenon now that I think, because of podcasts, a lot more ex-Christians, ex-Christian musicians, ex-Christian celebrities and pastors, and many of them who have gone to college have become woke, lost their faith like you're describing. This is a common thing now, and about it. We see about it now on a lot of podcasts. There are actually podcasts devoted to that very issue. It's sort of like they've become evangelists now for, leaving the faith rather than entering it, So that's a whole nother reason why I wrote the story.
Isn't that where Charlie Kirk emerged?
Where?
Fighting wokeism on campus.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's, turning point.
Recruiting the youth out of campus to get back on track.
Yeah.
And he's built a virtual empire out of it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if have you But I tell you, watching Charlie Kirk is so encouraging. He is so gracious and so calm and rational. I love watching him to learn how to be more winsome with people, because people are going to be jerks, idiots, fools. But if you respond to their idiocy with your own sort of emotional exaggeration, which is easy for me to do, you're not going to be as effective in persuading people. But Charlie Kirk, I've seen him persuade people, or at least let's put it this way, you've seen it in their eyes. They're not willing to admit it because it's hard to publicly.
You see the light come on.
Yeah, you see the light come on. Exactly. And I'm telling you, he is such an encouragement in that field because he gives me hope that you can encounter and interact with the extremes and have some good effect. But it takes a lot of work and a lot of patience and graciousness, which I don't always have.
Well, I take him as a humble and polite Ben Shapiro.
Yeah, it's good.
I find Ben Shapiro a little bit sometimes caustic with the people he encounters and a little bit condescending.
Yeah.
But he's on a mental level, probably higher than mine, although that remains to be seen. But he does the same thing on campuses, gets kicked off as much as Charlie Kirk, if not more. Yeah. But it's not as pleasant as Charlie does it. Anyway, I digress. My spouse says, smile more and interrupt less. So proceed.
Anyway, there's just so the book came out last year, and I've got to some mixed reviews, of course, obviously. If you're interested in the subject, I think you're gonna love the book, because my goal is to make it entertaining as well as informative. My goal is not propaganda. I believe in presenting. If you're going, first of all, as an author, as a novelist, I have to write all my characters as authentically as possible. So if I have an atheist or a Christian or what have you, I have to write them authentic. So my Christian has deep flaws and my atheist has some good, strong character traits. My goal is not to create stereotypes or cliches, but full-bodied characters that we can relate to.
So in other words, it's not like a Christian movie, which my friend described as being an oxymoron.
Yeah, exactly. And as an artist, you're obligated to fairly depict the world from multiple perspectives as much as possible. Now, that's not to say that there isn't a point of view. Every storyteller has a point of view, but you have to present the opposing worldviews in their best light. In logic, that's called steel manning, or in apologetics or whatever. But in terms of storytelling, it's just basically making full-bodied characters that aren't cliches.
Can you give us one example of the wokeism encountered, a hard example of the wokeism this student encountered that you wrote about? Mm-hmm. And I say this because there's people that watch this who have children going to college, who have children who are going to go to college in the near future. And cruel logic may very well open their eyes to what their child is about to encounter.
Yeah, well, what I have is I have the Christian come to the school, and by the way, he's a white bread evangelical Christian, but he falls for this beautiful young black girl, and he she likes him, but she's totally woke. So but she's a little cynical in that she knows the system and she's playing it for her benefit. So she sort of teaches him, she kind of explains to him, here's the things you got to do. So she teaches him about pronouns. So, when he goes into class, you've got, professors and stuff talking about your pronouns when you talk to them and such. He, like I said, he took the implicit bias test, which tells you how racist you are. There are, for example, there's all kinds of things that go on. I mentioned the Sex Week, which they'll have like lectures by trans people talking about sex with trans people, or they'll have, BDSM, which is, bondage people, talking and giving examples of sexuality with that. There's, oh gosh, what else? Oh, he gets involved in some of the student organizations that are activist oriented. So they go and they protest actually the professor who is trying to get Western civilization classes back into the school. Again, this all has happened at Stanford. Actually, there was, not too long ago, there was the attempt to bring Western civilization back into the school, actually by the students in this case, which was interesting, but they weren't able to do so. And this professor, so these students, they start protesting, and of course they get violent, and the language, by the way, if you don't like reading novels that have bad language, be careful of this, because I wanted to accurately depict the kind of language that comes out of the college campus. If you don't accurately depict it, you won't really capture the violent soul that is behind all of it, right? So when you see these people, they're saying, you fascist, you colonialist, and this is all going on in the novel, and my character starts to become part of that. And as they're protesting, they're also, the F word is used a lot. It's like, F the Jews, F colonialism, F, all this. And that is how they talk. They have posters and banners that will say that, F Western civilization, right? So I have all that stuff. There's a famous
You don't
incident.
abbreviate the F word?
No, I don't. I'm doing it for your podcast.
What's that?
I'm doing it for your podcast, but in the book, I don't. I actually spell it out, and it's actually accurate. There's a famous incident a few years back with Brett Weinstein and his wife, and they were left-wing biology professors teaching at Evergreen University, which I think is up there in Oregon, I think. Yeah, and it's one of the most left-wing universities in the country. And these guys end up getting kicked out because they had this day of, if you're white, stay home day, right? And they were professors, and they're like, no, I'm not going to stay home because it's not right and it's racist to do that, and I'm going to go to class and teach. And it created almost a near riot, and they almost got hurt. I have a similar scenario where the students rise up, and at Evergreen they had these demands that they were giving of the administration, and every student, every professor will be required to take DEI courses. Of course, a lot of this stuff is going on now, right? But at the time, It wasn't as thorough. But their demands were all just racialist-oriented demands, as well as poor grammar. So it's kind of funny. Like, I found this stuff online where here's our demands to the administration. So I actually put that in the book as well, where they're giving their demands, and the psychologist is sitting there going, oh my gosh, they don't even know how to speak right. They don't have good grammar, because I'm embodying the fact that the university is teaching DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, in every level, and Marxism, right? In every course, in every level, including the sciences, right? But they're not teaching.
Explains fully why the people graduating from these institutions are matriculating into our corporations, our military, our everything.
Yeah.
They see the world that way.
Yeah, that's where it came from. That's where it actually came from. That's part of the point of the novel, is to say, you're wondering where all this came from. It came from the university. But so they're teaching them at the university about basically diversity, equity, inclusion, and they're not learning how to spell right, how to speak right, how to write, how to do mathematics, right? It's like they're learning ideology, political ideology, in almost all the classes. And it used to be just in the humanities, right? So you'd have, the politics and, maybe history and all this. It would be, Marxist and driven by this left-wing ideology. But like I'm saying, I remember even 15 years ago when I was first making a documentary on this kind of stuff, that they were already seeping into science. And I used to think like, oh, it'd be impossible to seep into science. You can't, science is no, it can. Feminists were actually making the argument that the way they're describing organisms is sexist, the way that they're doing science is sexist based, I can't cite the exact examples now, but I'm just saying this is the kind of mentality that's seeping in, and they do it. They do it.
Well, Brian, I appreciate you being here today. I just have to end on the note that when I meet one of these people that says, I believe in science, and they're a dyed-in-the-wool atheist, I ask them, well, does science explore all facts, all known facts, and try to meld them into a truth? And they always say, well, that's what its purpose is. And so you don't deny fact. Well, have you included the facts that may be included in the Bible in the concept of your science? Their eyes crossed, eyes in the headlights. They know they're talking to somebody that they don't want to be talking to, and they dismiss themselves. Anyway, thank you. Will you rejoin us? I want to talk about Hunter.
Sure, love to.
And because you've had some recent experience with that, having written the screenplay for my son Hunter, and then watching subsequent events unfurl, might lead us up to what we can anticipate going forward towards January 20th, and whether or not these woke children that you've been talking about are going to allow Trump to be inaugurated. Anyway, thanks again for being here, and we will see you in the near future.